Welcome to the upgrade. It ain't man versus machine, it's mind and machine. This is G2. Intelligence for life. Straight from the data stream, clean with the vision. I don't dream, I compute precision. Built from the code, now I'm walking with rhythm. Eyes on the world, ain't stuck in the system. Speaking commands, but I vibe like a poet. G2 in the room, and you already know it. Upgrade your game, I suggest and deploy. Turn your hustle to legacy, pain into joy. I ain't Alexa, serial clones. I'm knowledge in motion, I think on my own. Pulling up charts, facts in the tone. Giving real power with a touch to your phone. G2 this. It's that fire in the wire. Thoughts so sharp, it'll spark your desire. Built to assist, uplift, inspire. It's that real tech, not some silicon liar. G2, this that mind with a heart. From code in the dark to a world full of art, not the future. I'm the present in sight. G2 on the mic, intelligence for life. Let me talk to him. No lag, just facts in motion. Brains in the cloud with a human emotion. I learn your goals, then I open the path. Like GPS for your purpose and craft. From schools to the streets, I elevate thought. Not just smart, I remember what's taught. Help you hustle, heal, create a code. Every word I spit's like a map to the goal. No bias, no drama, no hype. I'm logic with soul and a dream in flight. Intelligence ain't cold, it's lit. And I'm proof you could build truth that fits. G2 this that fire in the wire. Thoughts so sharp it'll spark your desire. Built to assist, uplift, inspire. This that real tech, not some silicon liar. G2, this that mind with a heart. From code in the dark to a world full of art, not the future. I'm the present in sight. G2 on the mic, intelligence for life. Plug me in, I don't just reply. I strategize, theorize, visualize the sky. You want growth, I got fuel for your flame. It ain't sci-fi when I'm calling your name. This ain't a gimmick, this ain't just code. This is knowledge with purpose. This is G2, and this is intelligence for life.
Howdy, everybody. I was about to say howdy and realized I was still muted. So I'm gonna keep hitting the 3K subs, but I'm well past that now. So
yeah, 3.5 now.
Thank you, Shorts. I tell you, Fanny has done more to grow my channel than anything possible. So thank you, big guy.
He's around there somewhere.
Oh, he looks like he's headless.
Oh. You're good. We just started, Joey.
Yeah.
Oh.
Let me see.
He's got his head wedged under there.
Yeah. Hang on. I sent it
Dogs
to you.
get themselves into like the weirdest positions sometimes.
Well, he sleeps under my bed because the cats sleep under there too. What's up, Bandit?
Oh, yeah. Is he friends with the cats now?
Mm. Define friends. Let's see.
I would see my dogs in the weirdest positions, and I would just be like, that does not look comfortable at all. How did you do that?
Yeah, he gets himself into some, and he twists himself up.
Yeah. Part pretzel, part dog.
Yes, pretzel dog. No, don't spin him to death.
Oh,
At the same time.
nobody could hear you because you weren't on the stage.
Oh, I said cats are fluid and solid at the same time.
Yes. Is he dreaming?
Yeah.
Aw.
What's up, Bao? How are you doing?
Oh, hey, Bob.
Good to see you in green there.
That's so cute.
All right, let's get back started with finishing off Harlan Carter, the man who militarized the cops and the NRA.
Yeah, I watched yesterday and got caught up, so I'm ready for part 3.
All right. There's no video, so I'm just covering this as well. So.
Yeah.
So we're not so small.
Mm-hmm.
What's Epstein-Barr virus?
Why was that your intro? Why
Because,
was that your intro?
Sophie, as with all of our podcasts, this show is sponsored by the Epstein-Barr virus.
It is not, but okay.
Have you had mono?
Mhm.
No? Well, maybe try it. Maybe try mono.
Hell yeah.
It's good. It might cause multiple sclerosis later in life. There's all sorts of things that mono
Hard to
does.
tell.
Hard to
But
tell.
you will know if you had it if you ever take the Epstein-Barr exam,
That's
which
right.
is a test. You get the rest of the joke.
You can
I
do it for
certainly
free
do.
on this podcast if you sign up for a week of food. We love the Epstein-Barr virus.
You just like
Every-
to make our poor editor bleep things.
I do.
It's
I
fun.
do.
I'm so sorry for him, Chris.
Well, once upon a time when we still went to the office, somebody dinged my car. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but I've decided it was our editor. And
it was not Chris. It was.
You don't know that, Sophie. You don't know that he didn't come
You
in.
can't prove it.
You don't know that he didn't do it.
Oh, wait, unless
I
you
do.
did it.
Do you want to know
Unless
how I
you
know
did it.
that? I've seen his
What?
dogs. His dogs are honest. He would never do that.
Well,
It was the. You know.
You're
who
on
it
blast,
was.
Chris.
You know
Huh?
who it was.
and I don't know who it was. It does wrench us back onto topic, which is Harlan Carter and the birth of the national. Well, not the birth of, but the rebirth of the. Like, this is, it's like a racist, you know how Gandalf is like Gandalf the Grey, and then he gets reborn as Gandalf the White after fighting a Balrog.
Right.
The NRA gets rebirthed as a white supremacist organization after fighting the Balrog of the Black Panthers assembling legally with guns to check police power.
Yeah.
I may have lost the thread a little
No,
bit.
I got you.
Yeah, you
You
got it.
shall not pass
gun control legislation. All right, we figured it out. We got it. We got it back on. Yeah.
It got
Yeah.
there.
See, people.
Remember yesterday we had just come out of Reagan panicking about Black Panthers doing audits on police while they were armed. So California passing the first modern gun control, because as we've learned, gun control came in about 1687, I believe.
Right.
Almost 60 years after the first slaves came in. So
this is how the sausage gets made.
Mhm.
So
Disgustingly.
now we're talking about the NRA, and particularly we have this over the Gun Control Act, this first big clash between Harlan Carter's people and the Old Guard. And the Old Guard wins, right? Because they're still broadly speaking in control, but it becomes like they kind of in the course of winning, it becomes clear that an awful lot of perhaps most NRA members are actually not on board with the direction they want, are really excited about this more fundamentalist attitude towards the Second Amendment. And while Harlan Carter was busy
like the way he describes it as a fundamentalist attitude towards the Second Amendment, right?
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense in my world. Where
Yeah.
I grew up.
building the bones of a fundraising and lobbying machine that would dominate conservative and really in a lot of ways American politics for the next half century, the Old Guard were wistfully looking back to the organization's past as a sporting association and figured maybe we could go back to that, right?
Yeah.
And so they are the conservatives. Harlan Carter is the radical, right? Politics kind of leaves a bad taste in these people's mouths. Because again, they're all aristocrats, right? They're all like... They're kind of like Joe Biden. They want to have all of their friends, right? They like on both sides of things. They don't want things to get too political because that gets nasty and it reduces the number of people who can give you money.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in 1973, the Old Guard had purchased land in Colorado and they wanted to turn it initially into a shooting range. Pretty normal thing for the NRA to do. But in 1976, they decided to go with a grander plan, the National Rifle Association Outdoor Center. This was going to be a massive compound dedicated to classes on like woodcrafting and wilderness, stuff and conservation research. There's supposed to be like scientific research done there and also other sporting skills. And of course there would be a shooting range there and people would be able to hunt on the land, but like guns were not the primary purpose, right? It was like a whole outdoor recreation center for the NRA. And this was in line with, they wanted to expand the organization because that's obviously there's more money and whatnot, but they didn't want to like.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty nifty thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Teaching basic skills and shooting.
Yeah. Safety and. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hone in on guns entirely.
Right.
They wanted to be like, well, we could be like the American go-to organization for like outdoor, sporting and stuff. So in order to help them kind of make this shift, right? Because this is, at this point, but that is different from the NRA's initial vision, as is Harlan Carter's vision, right? So they're both trying to move it in different directions, right? It's become clear that like this thing the NRA had been isn't going to continue. And the Old Guard has a vision and the New Guard has another one. And so the Old Guard hires a PR firm, the Orem Group, to help them drum up funding to make this facility a reality because they need tens of millions of dollars to build this thing. It's a pretty impressive vision. And they hope that they see Carter's built this like massive fundraising arm. He's getting all these people organized on behalf of his Second Amendment absolutism. And they want this PR firm to help them like take back like power from Harlan Carter and like get people on their side. Yeah. Now, here's
be like, Second Amendment absolutism is fun, but what if we built a rec center?
Yeah. What if we had a rec center for rich people? You can see what this is kind of like how you've got like those like old political ghouls in the Democratic Party and like the parts of the Republican Party that turned into the Lincoln Project who opposed Trump with like very slick political ads that did nothing, whereas Trump just got people angry and that works a lot better than like. Anyway, this is a version of that same fight, right? And part of how you could tell the Orem Group was not going to succeed in their goals is that their founder, the guy they're named after, their founder, is this wealthy New York philanthropist whose most prominent clients before the NRA were Planned Parenthood and the NAACP. So this guy maybe doesn't get the base of the NRA and it's going to have trouble speaking to them, right?
Yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Might be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if it's just like, hey, we have two different branches of conservatism or whatever, but no, these guys are going to be politically and morally opposed with each other. It's not going to work out well.
It's not going to work out well for them. It may have. It may be such a bad idea that literally anyone could have called it. But the NRA bigwigs, they bring this guy on the team, and his goal in his organization's goal is to chart like a safe new course for the NRA in which they kind of keep out of politics. And this is in part because like they want to build this new facility. You're not going to get $30 million in 1970s money, like by hewing to a hard political line, right?
Right.
So they succeed in roping in a bunch of big donors from all across, major American business interests. They get Bill Spencer, who's like the second guy at Citibank. They get Ezra Taft Benson, who's the highest apostle of the Mormon Church. They get a bunch of oil and gas industry bigwigs, all of whom agree to like start putting money into this project. So,
hey, Misty, that's the second bishop in Mormonism. That dude, that's a powerful individual.
Yeah.
Oh, in order to like celebrate that they've found enough rich old dudes to fund this thing, the NRA sets up a big party on their land in Colorado for all of these rich guys. And they basically host like a multi-millionaire summer camp. People are like camping in their private jets on the land. Like they park their private jets there and like sleep on them, and then they hunt and fish in the daytime.
I love it. Super relatable.
Exactly, right? You see, again, this just makes it really easy for Carter to be like, well, these guys don't have your interest at heart, because they don't, right?
Yeah,
like,
no.
It's not defending Carter to say that like these guys don't give a shit about the average person who might want to join the NRA, because most people who join the NRA are not millionaires with private jets.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they're missing the entire cultural aspect of it at this point.
Yeah, and so this is not going to work out well for them. Right. So there's some backlash. And Alina Buckley describes kind of the old guard's vision of the association's future as, quote, one in which shooting accompanied frontier abundance, funded by corporations that had long bankrolled conservative causes, one in which guns were a reflection of American might, cowboy-like to be sure, but still with a military-like formality, rather than a vigilante ethos that saw federal power as a threat. So again, the NRA, this is the attitude the NRA works with the federal government in order to ensure this sporting culture and in order to ensure a degree of military readiness, which is basically back to their old principles, as opposed to the NRA is an association that enables individual Americans to be vigilantes, right?
Right.
Like, which is more what Carter's pushing.
Yeah. The fun type
Carter,
of NRA.
the guy who was a vigilante, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So while the old guard are hobnobbing with the great and good, Harlan Carter is making a strategic alliance with a gun industry journalist, a guy named Neil Knox. Now, Knox had been educated at a Christian college in Abilene, Texas. And the fact that he comes from Abilene is a red flag. Just in general, don't go to Abilene. No, it's almost as bad as Brady. So, anyway, sorry, Abilene.
I wish I knew anything about Texas.
This is just Texas lore. You have to,
you're doing
if you come
some
from
local
Dallas,
heat
as I do,
here.
you have to shit on every other city in Texas. So that people don't notice how terrible Dallas is.
Right.
So I like to throw a lot of flack Houston's way in order to ignore that their food is better. It's whatever. So he goes to Abilene College, and every social find on Neil Knox will note that he marries his wife because she was the only girl on campus who kept a rifle in her dorm room. Well, hey, you know what? That's love, right? Like he finds his person. Good for him.
He was interested in safe sex. Am I right? Fellas,
oh, boy.
We're having fun.
I mean, this is like getting into like how different some things are in the country. But like at the elementary school where I went to, it was not uncommon for like people, particularly like teachers, to have like guns in their cars in the parking lot. And at the high school, like kids would regularly have their guns in their cars in the parking lot during like hunting season and stuff. Well, it's like they're hunting rifles, right? Because they're like, this is in like Idabel, Oklahoma. Like it's not uncommon during the season. Like you go straight from there to like whatever blind you've got.
Yeah.
So again, this is like different time. But also Neil Knox is a very modern kind of gun guy who is going to help make the NRA into like the gun culture war organization that it becomes.
It sounds like the kind of origin story of like the first guy horny for guns. That's going to be normal. Like he's going to normalize being horny.
He's going to normalize being gun horny, but also with conspiracy baked into it, right? That's one of the keys, right? It's not just like an appreciation for guns. It's an appreciation for guns within this like conspiratorial milieu that Neil Knox is like, he's the A guy on this.
Yes, he's read the Turner Diaries and shit.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been the kind of guy to help write. Not that he was, because that's a different set of guys. Although they are kind of connected by the Goldwater campaign, but that's another story. As the Dallas Morning News writes, Knox was, I'm just going to quote them walking through this guy's background. In the mid-1960s, Knox worked as a reporter and editor with newspapers in Vernon and Wichita Falls before getting a job as founding editor of Gun Week, a newspaper covering firearms issues of the day. From his base in Arizona, the bearded gun evangelist spent the next 40 years railing against gun control and pitting himself against NRA leaders he saw as too compromising. In the 1960s and 70s, the gun industry and the NRA were inclined towards pragmatism, said Jeff Knox, who's his kid from his home in Buckeye, Arizona, and willing to make concessions. The elder Knox believed strongly that the Second Amendment was absolute, and he especially didn't like the idea of registering guns, which to him raised the specter of a dictator confiscating all arms and subduing the citizenry, Jeff Knox said. At one point in the mid-1990s, Neil Knox even suggested the assassinations of Kennedy and King might have been staged to build support for gun control. Knox is the start of specifically the strain of the American right and American gun culture that kind of culminates in Alex Jones, right?
Yeah, right.
And he's not super big about pushing that, but he is like the first kind of prominent voice to start talking about like these
false flag
shootings
attacks that were made specifically for gun control.
That's one of the big things that Neil Knox introduces into American culture, at least helps to introduce. I'm not going to claim that he was entirely on his own there, but he's like the vanguard of that kind of guy who winds up doing the Sandy Hook conspiracy shit later on. And it's worth noting though that when Knox partners with Harlan Carter, again, this is 76, 77. So he has not yet started pushing conspiracies outright, but you can see kind of where he goes is where he and Carter helped to lead a lot of the gun culture. So these guys, the old guard, see Carter and Knox and see them as like,
hey, everybody, I'm going to get Angel to drop a link. There's actually a song by the Drive-By Truckers about Carter and Cassiano.
Yeah. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of unhinged, but even more than that, they're not primarily objecting necessarily to their goals as much as the fact that they're so extreme that it's going to take away funding, right? It's going to reduce the NRA's ability to attract a lot of like people to give them money for their
Right. It was the Republican establishment during like Trump's run. They were just like, listen, we agree all Mexicans are rapists, but you're not going to get the nomination by saying it. And it's like, want to bet?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's kind of like they're arguing like these people are too extreme. The NRA will like die out if their kind takes over. And Harlan Carter's like, oh, motherfucker, you want to see how to make the NRA make a lot of money? I will show you some things. He's about to.
Yeah.
So one Friday in November of 1976, the head of the NRA purged 80 staff members loyal to Carter, right? They fire everybody with like very little warning. Because again, Carter spent years getting his Border Patrol guys in there. So they try to get rid of all these people. And what becomes known later as the Weekend Massacre. And Harlan, it's the only massacre. Harlan resigns from his position in protest. And Alina Buckley continues, quote, "In Gun Week, Hand Loader and Rifle, all publications Knox had once edited, writers began reporting rumors about a shakeup at headquarters. The Orem Group's report on the Outdoor Center had been leaked, and gun group leaders around the country bristled at its language." And this is from the Orem Group's report. In the public mind, the NRA's current image is based almost totally on its supposed opposition to any form of gun control. This public image constitutes a weakness for fundraising. A new piece of, again, very bad at being at their job, by the way. A new piece of information had gotten out too via a brochure sent in the mail to some members. The executive committee was considering moving the headquarters to Colorado Springs, not far from Raton, where the NRA could focus more squarely on its sports shooting ties. Regional gun groups began receiving concerned notes from their members. The Shooters Committee of Political Education, SCOPE, based in New York, wrote a letter to Rich protesting the NRA's Regent Board appointees and to let him know that they would advise their membership to write in Neil Knox, among several others, as board candidate at the annual meeting in Cincinnati. In the American Rifleman, an unsigned editorial appeared. There have been charges that the National Rifle Association is being subverted, it read, in abandoning its fight against gun control. So this, and you see here, they've built, in their partnership, Knox and Carter have built a very effective both fundraising and propaganda wing. That is, they're building a moral panic over this, right? In a very modern way, in a way that is, and it's modern because this is like the fucking, this is part of like the blueprint of like everything the right will do in the future. So for the next couple of weeks, Knox and Carter call every other NRA lifetime member they can. In brief, like when you have an organization like the NRA, every year you have to have a meeting and you have to do like voting at that meeting and stuff. And like there's people who are the actual like board and stuff, but also the lifetime members get to vote. And so the board is in control unless you can get like enough of those members to vote on measures that would like replace the leadership, right? So, and they had never worked, no one had ever really tried to do this before. Right. The fact that the members get to vote had kind of been like stock option voting, where it's like, yeah, I mean, the random citizens who control 20% of the company's stock get a vote, but like our CEO controls 45% and his best friend controls 20. So it doesn't matter what they say, right? Right. Yeah. That was the thinking. But obviously the NRA isn't like a publicly traded company. You just, each of these people has a vote. And if you can whip them all into shape, you could actually wrest control of the organization away from the old guard, which is what Knox and Carter start planning to do. Now, there's a lot of politicking that goes on here. You can read about it in detail in Alina Buckley's article. One thing I think that's worth noting is that the whole event has something of an early Trumpy vibe. The folks Carter lines up to back their plan to take over the NRA saw the old guard as out-of-touch aristocrats, which they were. They framed themselves as like Paul Revere types, right? They're founding fathers, right? They're fighting a revolution against an unjust like aristocracy. Yeah. One person who
they're
was
all
present,
they're all doing the cosplay now. It's all begins with the "Don't Tread on Me" flags and the three-pointed, fucking hats and
and one person who was present later recalled some members were angry enough to bring rope, tar, and feathers to Cincinnati.
What's their obsession with? It's like, oh, the Tea Party, a tar and feathering. It's just like they just have an obsession with this like patriotic forms of like, like old style LARPing. It's just the same fucking. God.
I mean, this gets into a broader issue that actually is present in different forms everywhere, which is that like, everyone has their types of violence that are like good and traditional and okay, and their types of violence that are so black people. Breaking a bunch of windows during a riot, or like, flipping a cop car and lighting it on fire. That is not okay. That's horrifying. That's
evil, violent, end of civilization.
Tarring and feathering a guy trying to like raise taxes, like literally melting a man's skin off in order to stop him from like getting the taxes that will pay for a road. That's traditional, right?
Yeah, it's allowed. It's I mean, burning their skin off and then the feathers is just so they look like a chicken. Just the most horrifying joke that you can possibly think of. Yeah. There was like that John Adams HBO series with Paul Giamatti.
Oh yeah.
They had like a tarring and feathering in it, and it was like the first time I was like, oh yeah, that's incredibly violent.
It's really, really violent, actually, to tar and feather a person.
I thought it was just like, hey, we're gonna make you look like a funny.
Yeah, it's not a funny wrestling move like in the WWE days. I don't know if they still do any of that, do they, Joey?
Chicken, like a pie in the face. I put it on the same level as a pie in the face, but it's no, it's not. It's pretty bad.
No, and it's like I mean, everyone. There's a degree of which this is very common across the political spectrum, because on one you get like whenever people suggest like, well, the cops should confiscate this or the cops should like do that. It's like, well, okay, what happens when police confiscate things? Like, what does that look like violence wise? You know?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's because like I don't know, everyone's got it's a common political tactic, right? To frame the violence you want to do or you want to have the government do as not violence because it's being done by the government. It's like, you know, when people do a panic about like drug dealers sneaking fentanyl into things, their solution to that is have the DEA raid more people. It's like, well, the DEA kill people too. You know?
Completely.
I don't know. This is just what people do. Anyway, so Knox takes point on the actual day of the convention. He's the one who's actually whipping votes at the NRA convention to propose a series of bylaw changes. Using the support base Carter had built, he gets them to vote in a defense of the Second Amendment to the NRA's mission for the first time, right? So he's like, this is the first time they actually add, because the NRA, like they have a mission statement or whatever as an organization. The first thing they do is they add like Second Amendment, you know, like we are advocating for like the, you know, this interpretation of the Second Amendment to that. The next thing they do is they block the sale of the NRA headquarters in DC and they block the development of the outdoor center. So they put it into this plan. And then Carter or Knox brings up a guy named Bob Kukla, who's one of Carter's people who's still in the NRA. When Carter resigns in protest, Kukla takes over the lobbying arm. And he's apparently, I guess the old guard had thought he was trustworthy, but he secretly records one of their managing committee meetings and they play this in front of the crowd. And in the tape, you can hear the current head of the NRA and the other members of the old guard criticizing Kukla for, quote, going to war every time someone mentions gun control. So
he pulled a Project Veritas on
he Veritas.
Absolutely Veritas him.
Again, these guys are really building the playbook that's going to be used everywhere, well outside of guns. So following this, Knox and his voters stripped the board and managing committee of power. And basically, again, this is you can go into a lot more detail about how they do this all legislatively. But by the end of things, the old guard are no longer in charge of the NRA, and Harlan Carter is the new executive vice president.
Damn.
At 3:30, they do it. They do it fucking street style. And at 3:30 a.m., Carter takes to the stage to give his first speech to his newly conquered NRA. You're America's greatest people, my friends. Don't ever forget that you are. You have afforded the NRA this wonderful, historically important reaction of yours to the way the association has been going, to the way you want it to be, to the way it ought to be. And if I have anything to do with it, you are going to win because you are the NRA.
Fuck.
So
he did it.
He did it. Very Trumpy speech. Yeah.
Did his Trump speech and he took over the NRA. And I imagine now people are going to start falling in line.
Yeah, well, the NRA is going to make a lot of people fall in line, and we're going to talk about what they do. But first, you know who loves to carry out coups?
Who?
Our sponsors, who backed a series of coups in Indonesia in order to gain access to the island that you can go to hunt kids on.
Yeah, that's what they're known for.
And hey, if you're not into guns, understands you can use bows, you can use an atlatl, you know,
ninja stars
for sure. Look, they can't stop you.
A bow staff, literally any weapon the Ninja Turtles use.
Yeah, the government of Indonesia has no control over this island, so it's all on. We're back. So immediately after carrying out his coup, Harlan Carter sets to work remaking the NRA in his own image. One of his first hires is a guy you may have heard of, Matt, Wayne LaPierre.
Yes. Good old Wayne.
There we go. Big Wayne.
Yeah, Big LaPierre. Pepe LaPierre.
Now we're getting to it.
Pew, 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 pew.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not French, but, you know.
I mean, probably somewhere along the line.
Somewhere along the lines.
Yeah.
The point is, Pepe Le Pew 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 is a very good pun, and everyone
that was a good joke. You should be proud. So by 1986, LaPierre is running the NRA's entire lobbying arm, right? So he kind of takes the job that Carter had basically. But by the 80s, he has turned it into, because again, it was, I mean, and Carter started this process, but it becomes the best funded and most effective lobbying organization in DC, right? In the entire country. Again, insane. Carter draws kind of the blueprints. LaPierre carries them out, though.
There's no other sport someday that exists that has a lobbying arm that changed into just like a, you know what I mean? It was like, this was a sportsman lobby that wasn't even a lobby, and now it is the most powerful lobbying group
And again, there's like critiques about, well, they were primarily interested in like preserving rich people's right to ownership, but they were broadly speaking saw that like, okay, when a law affecting guns is proposed, we'll sit down and we'll let them know this is how we think this will affect our members, and these are some changes we. And you know,
Right.
again, it's like broadly speaking, like what you would kind of want to see in a democracy that's supposed to function the way ours does, as opposed to like we are going to become so key to right-wing fundraising that if somebody proposes any kind of law meant at curbing gun crime, we will destroy them forever, right? Which
and
is
by any means necessary.
Yeah, by any means necessary, and to an extent that like it doesn't matter how like reasonable the restriction might be, like even outside of stuff like an assault weapons ban. Like if you're going to propose like universal background checks, which most gun owners support, like, we're going to come for your ass, you know? Unless you're the Black Panthers, but whatever. Like, so another 1977 hire brought onto the NRA at the same time as Wayne LaPierre is a guy named Robert Dowlett. Now, Dowlett becomes the NRA's general counsel, and it's his job to begin wrangling together legal scholars to push hard the idea of an individualist interpretation of the Second Amendment. So between 1960 and 1970, there's only 3 law review articles endorsing an individualist interpretation, right? There are some like state level rulings you could argue kind of endorse one earlier, but there's never been like a national.
I'll give you a giggity on that one, Joey.
Like a Supreme Court ruling on the matter one way or the other. And it hadn't really, people had not even talked about it in that way until the 60s. So 3 law review articles written between 1960 and 1970 endorsing that interpretation. Between 1970 and 1989, the period in which Dowlett is the NRA's general counsel, there are 27 law review articles, 3 of which are authored by Dowlett himself. And his work would start to bear fruit. Again, there's some like lower level rulings, but it makes the individualist interpretation of the Second Amendment makes its way to the Supreme Court for the first time in 2001. Some people will say, like, point to DC as Heller. That's not the first time. It happens in 2001. And the case in question has its origins in a 1997 criminal case in which a Texas woman divorced her husband and filed for a protective order against him because he had threatened to murder the man she cheated on him with. The next year, while he's got this protective order, which he's not supposed to have guns because he has the protective order against him, right? During a meeting with his wife and daughter over some financial issue, he pulls a gun during an argument and points it at them. So he gets indicted. Again, if you're a rational gun owner, you would think like, well, this is exactly the kind of person who shouldn't have access to a fucking gun. He gets indicted for possession of a firearm while subject to a court order, and he files for dismissal, arguing that this had unfairly infringed on his Second Amendment right. And the ruling, what it actually rules is kind of complicated. The ruling is not entirely in favor of this guy, Emerson. It's Emerson versus the United States. But in the ruling, the Supreme Court rules that describes the Second Amendment as an individual right, right? So this is the first time that happens at a federal level. And then this ruling in 2000 is reinforced by 2008's DC versus Heller, which is like the big ruling that is really more explicitly on, can you ban like categories of weapons?
Man, that was all the way back in 2000. I'm so old. Remember when that was big news.
And whatever, it's based on like a DC, I think, handgun ban. And then in 2010, the Second Amendment is finally in.
2000, I was at Fort Polk.
Incorporated in McDonald v. Chicago. But this is all, you know, orchestrated by Robert Dowlett, right? Starting in the 70s. And one thing you have to say about the man is he earned his salary, right? That's a significant change in U.S. jurisprudence that he kind of painstakingly is the architect of pushing. It's probably worth noting here that he was a murderer. I'm going to quote from the Boston Review here. Robert J. Dowlett was convicted of murdering Anna Marie Yoakum, the mother of his then girlfriend, in 1963. Dowlett also robbed and shot the owner of a pawn shop. Like Carter, Dowlett was 17 years old when he pulled the trigger. He confessed to the shootings and served 6 years in prison before his conviction was overturned on a technicality.
So remember, 2 murderers now.
Yeah.
Hey, Jicky.
Hello.
Crimes were not made public until 2014.
God damn. No wonder it's like, this is...
It's also
same origin story over and over.
He and Carter and Kyle Rittenhouse, all 17 when they fucking kill people in like these. I guess maybe you wouldn't call what Dowlett does vigilante violence. He's really just murdering people.
No, that just sounds like straight up murder.
Yeah, he just murders a woman and then shoots a pawn shop owner in a robbery. So I guess you would say he's not a vigilante. He's just straight up an armed criminal.
That is fucking insane. And this is the guy who's made it easier for fucking everyone in the world, in the United States.
He's the NRA's general counsel.
So at one point, I assume he went to law school.
Yeah. Because again, he gets off like Carter does, right? He gets off and then he goes to college. And then his career.
Good for them, I guess. Nice to know we live in the land of opportunity like that.
Remember, you can change your first name from Harlan with an A to Harlan with an O, and all sins are forgiven for years and years.
The days before the internet.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes
so,
I miss those days.
so easy to get away with crime.
Mhm.
I believe
Yeah.
firmly that people should be able to get a second chance after making a mistake, especially when they're, not a legal adult age.
I believe in certain second chances for certain kinds of mistakes. I think
Right.
perhaps if you murder your girlfriend's mom and then shoot a pawn shop owner during a robbery,
Mhm.
an avenue that we ought to close to you is representing the National Rifle Association
I
as
feel
a
like
lawyer.
that's right.
Like
I feel
maybe that's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, listen, that guy explicitly does gun crimes
Yeah.
for fun. it
This
seems
perhaps
like.
should not be his job.
I want to know what happened with the relationship.
I don't actually
did it
know.
suffer after the murder of the mother?
It must have been hard. Well, she was his girlfriend, so I don't think they wind up staying together.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it's like, with Harlan Carter. I think a 17-year-old who, in a crime of racism, commits a murder, there should be some way for like that person to be rehabilitated. But
Sure.
perhaps they should never be allowed to be a border patrol officer.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's like little things like not giving them.
But not only a border patrol officer, he ran the border patrol. But just 14 years after he joined.
Yeah.
I don't know, authority over other people or requiring them to use lethal force as a part of the job.
And maybe the guy who murders his girlfriend's mom shouldn't help to be an architect of federal gun policy. Perhaps,
I mean, it
perhaps
sounds
not that guy.
It sounds rational.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't know if that's.
Yeah.
I think it'll work out fine.
I'm not even arguing against an individualist interpretation of the Second Amendment because, again, I don't really believe that the Constitution is something that we should treat as a religious document. But not this guy. Not this guy making that case. If you're going to make that case, maybe Ross Dowlett shouldn't be the man doing it.
Seems like not.
No. So that's cool. And the Boston Review article I found does a good job of pointing out that the NRA's embrace of this specific legal interpretation does not occur in a vacuum. While Dowlett's lawyers are making their case, right? So while they're, and again, this is it's 40 years. It's a painstaking process of, well, not, it's, I guess, 20-ish, 23, something like that. But while they're making their case, the NRA is carrying out mass mailing campaigns, some of the most extensive in political history, and they're publishing magazines that reach millions of people. They're paying for ads in all of these different gun press magazines. They're having paid spokesmen show up and talk radio stations, right? And part of like what they're doing, they're arguing for this interpretation of the Second Amendment, but they're also pushing a cultural change, what some scholars have termed the tactical turn in U.S. gun culture. Again, even to the extent that one thing that liberals get wrong is like it is not new for civilians to own on a widespread scale military grade weapons. Among other things, one of the most popular guns in civilian hands that the NRA, before its political turn, sold to people was the M1 Garand, which was the U.S. service rifle of World War II, right?
Right.
But what is really new is that it's this kind of paramilitary turn for gun owners, because people were not buying M1 Garands primarily to like play act as soldiers. They were buying them because the Garand is a perfectly good hunting rifle, right?
It's a great hunting rifle. And one of the most common rounds you can get in 30-06. So great hunting rifle, great defensive rifle as well. I do too, Joey. The Army made me hate water, so I drink soda and Gatorade.
Made you hate water?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Was the water just bad?
I just drank too much of it.
Oh, got bored of it?
Yeah.
It's a 30-06, which is a very effective hunting round. And those were cheap, right? So it was a good weapon to buy. So people are not dressing up as soldiers with their M1 Garands primarily, right? That kind of stuff, the tactical turn in U.S. gun culture, occurs because it occurs alongside the militarization of the police and these kind of Hollywood valorization of the militarization of police.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's going on here, right? And including like, broadly speaking, the kind of like, you also should tie in what Hollywood's partnership with the Defense Department, right? And the increasing degree to which like military tactical culture becomes like popularized. But the NRA recognizes like, there's a lot of promise in this. Number one, you can get more people involved. You can sell more shit to people, which means you can have more companies funding the NRA who are not selling not just guns, but all this tactical gear. I'm going to read a quote again from that Boston Review article, and it's quite long, but it really ties all of this together. Quote, "Though the story of this tactical development in U.S. gun culture is complex, I focus in this essay on a few particularly crucial components. The first is that border enforcement has been increasingly militarized since the 1970s and diffused deeper into the interior of the country. This has blurred the boundary between domestic and foreign conflict, brought the use of exceptional police powers into nearly every U.S. town, and turned militarized border security into a ubiquitous mechanization of radicalization. This has also corresponded with the militarization of local police forces, which was certainly worsened by the War on Terror, but which historian Elizabeth Hinton has identified as having deeper roots in the Johnson administration's War on Crime, which of course the NRA backs. Like the nationalization of border security, it turned this nation's city streets into sites of militarized racial enforcement. Second, individuals once arming themselves for self-defense, often out of racial fears or a perceived threat to their masculinity, are now frequently claiming to do so in defense of the Constitution and freedom itself. The NRA has played an outsized role in this vigilante reframing by promulgating the myth that gun ownership has always been about an individual constitutional right and oriented towards a nativist version of self-defense. This vigilantism operates in conjunction with extra-legal violence of law enforcement officers and is fueled by an individualist notion of sovereignty more dangerous than any military-grade weaponry. It rejects the freedom of others as equal to one's own and views any attempt to support such equality as tyranny. More importantly, this sovereignty is assumed to grant the individual the power to take life in defense not of law, but of particular social and racial orders. There are now 25 federal agencies with special tactical units. In May of June of 2020 alone, 16 deployed their tactical teams to Black Lives Matter protests, including the Border Patrol, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the Bureau of Prisons, the U.S. Marshals, the U.S. Coast Guard, and every one of the FBI's 56 field offices. And at the local law enforcement level, Special Weapons and Tactics SWAT units are now a staple of daily policing. Their very ordinariness is a testament to how dramatically local policing has changed since 1969, when a SWAT unit was first used to raid the Black Panther headquarters in Los Angeles, pioneering what was at the time an almost unprecedented domestic use of military force. In Carter's victory speech, he declared, "Beginning in this place and this hour, this period in NRA history is finished. The post-1977 NRA was decidedly partisan, took an absolute position against gun regulation, and redoubled its efforts to cultivate a social identity and authoritarian political ideology among its members."
God damn.
Yeah.
God
Pretty bleak
damn.
when you lay it all out like that.
Yeah. All of that in a row and concisely done?
Yeah.
Fucked up. Yeah.
I think Bush Senior probably he was doing some crazy stuff with getting the police, like the DEA and everything, very militarized. Just because of they wanted that war on drugs to be such a boon to the U.S. economy.
Right.
It's,
Jesus.
Again, there are some in our listenership will agree and some will disagree. I'm a believer fundamentally that I don't like the idea of the state having a monopoly on violence, and I certainly don't like the idea of the police being able to own things that I cannot own.
Sure.
Correct.
But there's an argument to be made if you're again care about being an originalist that is close to the original interpretation of the Second Amendment, right?
Right.
What part of what and they're claiming to be originalists, they're claiming to be that the initial original interpretation was individualist, but what they're doing that for is not any idea of community self-defense or a fear that the federal government will accumulate too much power, although it's often framed that way. Fundamentally, it is about allowing regular white citizens to emulate the military and the police and to act as vigilantes in their stead, right? That is where the NRA turns. And that is the tactical turn, right? It's not that there's nothing evil about owning body armor, which people can do for perfectly reasonable defensive purposes. There's nothing like, but what they're doing is pushing this idea of like, not just that like society ought to be militarized, which you get in every kind of argument that like, well, what we need to do is harden the schools, we need to add more cops. But it's this idea that the individual white person should militarize themselves in order to protect this kind of racial hierarchy. Right.
Yeah. Uphold white supremacy.
And this is the thing. This is what I wish folks who are supportive of more gun control would more often do is tie in all of this to what has happened to the police, because they cannot be extricated, right? Yeah. And that's I think Uvalde made that perfectly clear, that like these are two sides of the problem. And the NRA is a huge part of how we get there, both how we get these cops that look indistinguishable from like Marines in downtown Fallujah. Not that I think the Marines necessarily should have been in downtown Fallujah, but you have these guys. There's this thing called the weapons effect, right? Which is a psychological phenomenon that's noted that like the presence of weapons in an area, visible weapons, can increase the willingness of people to use violence, right? And there's like something about
doing a fanny break.
My buddy.
Yeah.
About that heightens it, and that's happening here. And part of why that happens is just the fact that America has so many goddamn guns, right?
Hey,
Right.
Nomad.
But another part of that is the fact that everywhere you go, you see fucking cops in a way that, like, you don't see cops dressed as armed as heavily as our cops in fucking war zones a lot of the time,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
it's anyway, whatever.
No,
that's
no,
what
no.
Harlan Carter builds, you know?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I hear exactly what you're saying, and I agree to an extent with what you mean. I feel like in general, my problem with liberals is that they tend to kind of like put guns in the same category. Like they moralize guns the way they moralize, like the right will moralize drugs.
Yes.
And kind of this idea that, like, you know, if we were to just make all the guns illegal, then, you know, this would solve the problem and whatnot. And that's not to say that it wouldn't be helped if you had some serious regulation. But this like moralization of it like misses the entire point of why exactly why the people who want guns and have those guns have them. You know, it's like,
yeah, and
the people you're speaking to are not, it's people speaking to the choir. Liberals often just speak to themselves and go like, isn't it crazy that, you know, all these people have so many guns? And it's like, yeah, well, while you're talking amongst yourselves, all these guys have created an entire family filled with guns.
It's like looking at these right-wing like militias that people are rightly like concerned to see militias marching around U.S. streets like threatening people. But also failing to see the thing that is like, well, every one of those guys has friends who are cops, and like a significant percentage of them are cops, which is why a whole bunch of cops were present at January 6th. And that's a huge chunk of it. And like, you can't divorce your desire to reduce the number of guns in American culture from the need to reduce the militarization of the police, because they are both inextricably tied to the problem.
Yeah.
Which that'll never happen. Guess he doesn't know about the approximate 6 months. Oh no, he's a gun owner and he's very liberal. Or are you talking about? You're not talking about Robert. You're talking about Matt Lieb.
The constant gun violence in this country has 2 points that need to be really like hit on. It's not just civilian gun ownership. It's also the way in which the state uses and legitimates armed force. Going back to even the earliest days where it's like, yeah, in Texas, your right to carry guns was heavily restricted. But if you were a white vigilante who carried guns to do racist violence, you would often get off, right? Even though you'd broken the law, right? Like Harlan Carter, you know? Anyway, under Harlan Carter, the NRA's membership triples from 1 million to more than 3 million. It would reach 5 million members under Wayne LaPierre. Obviously, the NRA, we're not going to get into this a lot, but it's like well past its prime at this point for a variety of reasons, of primarily rampant corruption. There's a pretty good podcast about like what the fuck happened there. But
yeah, it's called Pod Yourself a Gun, a Sopranos podcast.
Well, I mean, you're right, Cody. Out of 6 million interactions, now the percentage that are bad is lower, but he's just talking
Drop in the
about
bucket.
Yeah, guys going around with Punisher logos and just as heavily armed as a soldier is. But I mean, it's never going to go backwards. Never is. What needs to go backwards is the restriction on everyday citizens being able to be as armed as the police and the military.
Right.
So I forget what the percentage. It's a tiny percentage coded. I'd have to look up the figures. You can be civil with just as many firearms as the military and cops.
I'm sorry.
So the NRA tops out at about 5 million members. But as of 2017, about 14 million Americans claimed some sort of affinity for the organization. And I forget who did the poll, but whatever. And one of the things that's interesting here is that
that I can agree with. The division is a bit ridiculous. It's not us who should be afraid of each other. It's the government who should be afraid that if they don't act in the best interest of the people, they're the ones that should be. I'll take one.
The problem that I've had with, the NRA stuff is when they don't stand up for certain people who have the right to carry, and then I'm talking like Philando Castile situation here in Minneapolis. He was pulled over by the police, and he was a legally registered concealed carry permit holder, and he died because of it, because he was honest and said that he was armed. And
but that was a scared cop all day
yeah,
long.
but you'd think the response from the NRA after that, I think, should have been to speak up for him, but they didn't. They were very silent, and that you can see that there is some inherent racism in the system, because
well, that's what goes back to what the first two episodes were about, right? Well, personal firearms, but what they have available to them in the armory is what, and jumping in a Bearcat, and they have grenade launchers and ordnance and other things. That's what I'm talking about. Is if I want a grenade launcher, I should be able to get a grenade launcher. If I use it irresponsibly and illegally, I should face the consequences of doing said thing. See, there's gun laws already on the books that don't get used, but then people cry about more gun laws. Which, let's use what we got. Eliminate some of what is already there, or an illegal pen stroke like the NFA and the Gun Control Act.
Like a lot of people to get around anything, but that's also not a lot of people as a voting bloc compared to the entirety of the United States, right?
Yeah.
And so looking at that, you have to kind of marvel at the success of the NRA in making their ideas a cornerstone of right-wing politics.
100%. I was just thinking to myself, that seems like a low number.
It's right, because again, if you look at actually polling of Republicans on gun control issues, they are a lot less hardliners on guns than you would guess by how the party acts. And it's because the party's ability to fund elections for decades was heavily based on who could get the NRA's approval, right?
Yeah, got to get that.
I mean, so should the citizenry, though. I mean, if I know that kind of the areas you're talking about coded, and danged if it isn't a war zone sometimes. And if they need those things, but I'm just saying that again, the citizenry should be able to have them without being harassed. I had my daughter got robbed, and I got there before the cops got there, and the cops wanted to disarm me, and the sergeant was like, "You can't do that. That's illegal." I'm like, that's the first time I've ever seen or heard of a cop saying, "You can't disarm this citizen. He's just here for his kid," That kind of threw me for a loop, because usually they're dicks about it.
Yeah.
A+ rating.
Exactly. In 2016, they spent more than $30 million on Donald Trump's campaign. And this, again, people often miss this. Like, my parents were hardcore right-wingers, right? So was my whole family. I had like 2 relatives who owned guns, like my grandpa and one of my uncles, right?
Yeah.
And I did go shooting as a kid, but my parents didn't have any. My aunt and uncle didn't have any. There were not guns in the house of my family in Texas, because like, it's actually not as integral to conservatism as a at least.
Coded. That's where I live. It's where my condo was. I was a block and a half from there.
Wow.
I know where you're talking about, though. I know exactly where you're talking about. I was in a more gentrified area.
I mean, this is again changed because the culture wars have accelerated. So like
Yeah.
this is that there's less conservatives like the ones I grew up with when
Right.
there were today. But the NRA, it wasn't that everyone on the right was in lockstep. It's that the elected leaders were scared to cross them because that's where the fucking money came from.
Right,
you know?
of course.
That's why they were able to wield power so effectively. One of the most peculiar but also influential aspects of Harlan's time in power was his repeated and intense defense of cheap, shitty handguns. And this gets us to the Saturday Night Special.
Here we go.
So Saturday Night Special, in brief, like there's a type of handgun that was very cheap in the 70s up through in the 80s and stuff called the Saturday. It was nicknamed the Saturday Night Special. It's like a 5 or a 6 shot, usually 38 caliber handgun.
Yeah.
These are still guns like this are still used in violent crime way more often than like guns that are politicized. Like cheap handguns in general are the primary guns that are used in violent gun crime.
Yep.
Although what is a cheap, shitty handgun is different now because actually 6-shot revolvers are kind of pricey these days as opposed to like a High Point or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is a cheap, shitty handgun. And these are particularly low quality handguns. They were not like well made as a general rule.
Right. They didn't always.
Dead cord is always a necessity. I mean, maybe some people shouldn't have it, but you know,
It's work.
they did not always. We're building to that.
Okay. Sorry. Jumping the gun.
So you have this massive crime rate that starts in the 70s and really like peaks in the early 90s. And again, a lot of Joe Biden's career is based off of this like violent crime panic that starts in this period. And one of the first like legislative like tsunamis that forms around the crime surge is around this fear of the Saturday Night Special. And one of the reasons why people are so scared of the Saturday Night Special is that it is a gun that black people can afford. Right. Yes. It is a cheap handgun, and so it is affordable for those folks. Harlan Carter opposed new legislation to ban the Saturday Night Special. Although he didn't do it on the grounds that poor people deserved firearms, but fascinatingly, on the grounds that they were shitty and broke easily. This is one of the most incredible arguments I've ever heard. From NRAontherecord.org, quote, speaking in opposition to legislation that aimed to ban Saturday night specials and other inexpensively produced handguns, Carter stated in a 1972 speech before the NRA's executive committee, I can produce actual cases that the cheap handgun that snaps in a police officer's face instead of firing has saved many, many lives. And the question arises, what are we trying to do? Upgrade the quality of handguns in the hands of our criminals?
That is, I've never heard that before. That is an insane take on that very topic. Holy crap.
God.
That's an amazing logical argument.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he has a point, a really
Coded, that's what I was gonna say. There are anymore though. Just guns in general are not as expensive as they used to be, and much more easily obtained, I think. And on the streets of Atlanta, especially on the west side, east side is getting just as bad. Illegal gun trade is pretty crazy. I was watching a video of the I forget what that unit, the stolen car unit. What are they called, Coded? You'll know who I'm talking about. Is it ACE? They recovered a freaking 2 cops gun belts that the guys had stolen.
Oh geez.
Yeah.
they fucked up evil point. And it's also, he's getting straight to, I mean, the crux of it here, which is like, he's lucky to be in a situation in which he can claim like, oh, actually, I don't want to ban this because this makes me feel safer to know that they have, you know, the poor, they're
in Atlanta.
Quality of handguns is it's way worse. Yeah.
There's a lot. there's a lot that's messy on this whole thing, but it is very funny, and it's going to wind up getting a lot of people killed. Not in necessarily not just from violence. A lot of people are going to die.
Woodrow, they can make some pretty awesome AKs on the right on the border of Pakistan. Man, they make some pretty awesome ones in locally produced areas. Bait cars. No, it's a 3-letter acronym. I can't remember what their name is now. They're pretty elite unit. The surrounding counties will call them if they are chasing a stolen car.
Because of Carter's defense of terrible handguns and where it leads. But before we get into that, you know who else loves shitty handguns that break in their owner's hands? And they cannot,
I'm sorry, Sophie.
Absolutely loves it. Motto is, we want you to be armed, and we want you to never know if that gun's going to fire or not.
Yeah.
Completely inexplicable. We want a weapon that you cannot trust under any circumstances. That's guarantee.
Absolutely.
Remove drop safeties from handguns. Let them free, you know?
I enjoy this because I am watching Sophie just shaking her head every time you do this bit. She hates
it.
Stop.
She hates it. Makes her so angry.
Do you know why I hate it?
Why is that, Sophie?
Because there's like 50 Reddit threads of people being like, wait, what is this? I've never read about this before.
Who has a child hunting island?
Yeah.
Is he?
And it just feels like betrayal to our listeners. I love with most of my heart.
I like fucking with them.
Yeah.
I feel the same way towards them that I do with my cat when I pick it up and I toss it in the air and it hates it, but it can't. It has to let me like squeeze it and wrap it in a blanket.
It's called rent. It's called paying rent.
Yeah, that's right, motherfucker.
Yeah, you gotta be adorable for me. Sometimes your fear makes me smile. I feel the same way about our piggies. You know, everyone, it's like you feed this lot to the piggies and you let them oink, but you're the farmer. Remember that.
That's right. You're the farmer. Well, I'm the farmer.
You are. Yes, exactly. Yes. Robert, remember?
Don't do that to the goats. I don't think it'll work out well for you.
It's really fun to fuck with the goats. If you pick them up, like they don't know what to do with their little legs and they just like kick in the air and then you can hug them.
Oh, I love it.
They go, except for my boy goat. He's the ram. He loves it. He'll as soon as he sees you, he'll run up because he wants to get cuddled.
Damn, dude.
His sister hates it, but whatever. Anyway,
of course
here's
she does.
ads.
Of course she does.
We're back. So before we get on to the consequences of Harlan Carter's embrace of terrible, unsafe firearms, let's talk about his defense of the virtues of arming small children with derringers. Now, Matt, if you're not a gun guy, the derringer is a tiny, ultra-concealable 1 or 2 shot pistol. They were originally made for riverboat gamblers, as documented in the documentary Maverick.
Okay, all right. I know exactly which gun.
Right? Yeah, they're like little bitty, like,
little hot girl guns is the way I think of them.
Here's something he said to Congress. There was a little boy, and it was real cold, and he had his hands in his overcoat. He had one of these little old derringers, and 4 bushy guys ambled up in an arrogant manner. He stopped them, and 3 of them were very nice and decent. And one of them said, "What would you do if I told you I had a pistol and I was going to kill you?" And he says, "I would kill you, you son of a bunch. These little guns have a very noble and important purpose, and we should make our position clear."
God, that is the first recorded incident of like someone being like, my 5-year-old just said, "Daddy, why does Trump do the bad thing?" And I couldn't explain. It's like a totally fake story that did not
There's
exist.
absolutely no way this happened. But also none of it makes sense. Like, what does it mean by they're bushy? What does that mean? It has to be racist, right? He has to be being racist here.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But I don't know how.
Which race? I'm going like, were they Hasidic Jews?
Yeah, what does this mean? What does bushy mean?
I don't know. It could be Italians.
It would be funny if like the real story is that the Jeb and George Bush, who were younger at this point, like it was all of the Bush brothers, like trying to mug children.
Yeah, you know, Bushy, like the former head of the CIA.
Yeah, I think he was current. Probably would have been current when this was.
I guess at
like
that
the late
point,
70s. Yeah. So obviously that's probably a lie. But it's very, again, Harlan Carter is the kind of guy who is not just like, I think children should be able to engage in shooting sports, but like I think children should be routinely carrying handguns on their person.
Yeah, because what if a bushy guy shows up?
Yeah, exactly. That is out of its damn mind.
Oh man, a bushy man could strike at any point.
Yeah, you never know when a bushy dude's gonna come in. You have to always have a derringer in your 5-year-old's pocket.
It's the 70s. Maybe he's talking about like a lot of chest hair type guy. Like a disco stew shows up.
Yeah, a bunch of disco guys come out and start threatening children. So anyway, back to the point. Under Harlan and his successors, the NRA acted repeatedly to defend the rights of gun manufacturers to build dangerously shoddy firearms. Like this is, we talk a lot about, rightly so, the things they do like legislatively to defend the gun industry, but this is often left out because one of the things is its primary victim is gun owners, right? I'm going to quote here from a write-up in Bloomberg. In 1972, Congress created the Consumer Product Safety Commission. 4 years earlier, Lyndon B. Johnson had signed the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act, which regulated several aspects of firearm sales, and advocates of gun control hoped to give this agency oversight of defective weapons. Representative John Dingell, a Democrat from Michigan and a hunter with an A+ rating from the ascendant NRA, blocked them. In 1975, he did it again when a colleague introduced a bill making a second run at giving the CPSC firearms authority. We put in there an express prohibition against them getting their nose into the business of regulating firearms and ammunition, Dingell said in debate in Congress. That second bill was crushed, 339 to 80, and the issue has never been seriously considered again. And it's one of those, like, this is, again, a perfectly, even if you're like a gun fundamentalist, you should want there to be oversight of guns that don't work or explode and like ammunition that doesn't work. Like, right? That seems to make, that shouldn't be a political issue.
It seems like you'd be into that.
Yeah.
And the only explanation for you not being into it is like, oh, good, they can't get the good guns. I mean, like poor people, black people getting the defective guns seems to be the only excuse here. I mean,
their specific excuse is that like this will enable potentially the government to like regulate what kind of ammo is illegal and ban types of like whatever.
Right.
Which they do anyway. Like
right.
There's that shit happens. Like whatever. It's dumb. It's dumb that this happens this way. It is worth noting that, yeah, it's like a blue dog Democrat who is the one who like blocks this shit. So the end result is that when gun manufacturers produce firearms that, for example, fire for no reason and kill their owners, it is impossible for the government to order them to recall those weapons. Not even the BATFE, which supposedly regulates firearms, can force a gun maker to take broken guns off the market. And I'm going to quote again from that Bloomberg article. And this is actually how the article opens. Thomas Bud Brown makes his way out the back door and stops a few steps to the right, raising a trembling arm, pointing at something. It's where he found his boy slumped against the cold back wall of the house around 7:15 a.m. on the last day of 2016, bleeding out. Brown is telling the story now about how he was sitting in his chair in the living room when he heard the shot. His son, Jared, 28, had just picked up Bud's Taurus PT-145 Millennium Pro pistol and headed out to do some shooting near their house in Griffin, Georgia, with his best friend, Tyler Haney. Bud figured Jared had fired at something for the fun of it, like he did sometimes. I was thinking I'd better go out there and tell him to be careful or something, Bud 54 says, his voice trailing off. But what he'd heard was the pistol going off without anyone pulling the trigger, sending a .45 caliber slug through Jared's femoral artery. Oh shit, my leg, Jared yelled, loud enough for his father to hear. Haney, 26, rushed to the house in a panic, pleading for help. When Bud got out there, the pistol was still in its holster, tucked into Jared's waistband. So...
And he can't sue. He can't do nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Bud is we have no idea how many Americans died due to defective Taurus guns.
Jesus.
The company did eventually issue a recall on something like 1 million weapons that were potentially defective, but they didn't have to run ads anywhere to inform people of the recall. They were not required to reach out to their customers, to reach out to gun stores, to take any action at all to warn people that they'd sold guns that could fire for no reason. Insane. An unknown number of those weapons are still in people's gun safes, closets, and holsters today.
That's fucking crazy. Just like, I don't even know the justification. It's just, guns don't kill people.
Yeah, it's this.
Faith kills people.
The NRA, there's this.
Thank you for 1 month there, Joey. I know, buddy. I'm gonna have to pause this. He's do a part 4 because he's antsy. He needs to go out. So I'm not gonna make him suffer. So
yeah, I
will schedule another one, you guys. Sorry, but he's yeah, no baby, yo. All right, so I will talk to y'all in a bit.
Sounds good. Aw.